Well, welcome everyone. Today's session or today's video is going to be me interviewing a very, very good footballer, a good captain, and a very good leader. Started off his journey as a corporate man and now has something of his own which is related to sports and in the sports field in order to give all the youngsters and the potentially professionals of tomorrow a chance that we did not have, a chance that uh, we were not given because of the various responsibilities that we needed to get to, especially in terms of work. But right now, with the sports industry that is booming all over the world, and it's really picking up in India. Here we have Rahul Rodrigues, who's going to explain what he does and a little bit on his journey. So help me welcome Rahul Rodrigues. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much for your time, Rahul.
Thanks, Carlton. You took me back in time. That was a very kind introduction. So thank you for that. I'm delighted to be on your show and platform. So thanks for the opportunity. And you did take me back in time to our days at Aloysius. You, for one, were a very good footballer yourself. The man for all seasons and all positions, as they say. But yeah, very fond memories. And I think we did accomplish a fair bit during our days in Aloysius. Managed to win quite a few trophies and yeah, fun times. Well, we do miss those days. And but it's lovely to be here. How the years have flown by. Uh, and yeah, thinking of it, it's going on almost 15 years now, and yes, a long journey. So just to quickly give you a brief, Carlton, I'm asked this question very often as to how I took up to football, and I love narrating the story, time and over again. I was fortunate to grow up in the vicinity of the main stadium here in Goa, which is the Fatorda Stadium. Quite literally a 5-minute walk from where I live. The stadium back then was constructed in record time of 6 months by the then sports minister, and the stadium was set up or built rather in '89. So I was approximately about 7 years back then. And I remember going to the opening night and being in absolute awe of the stadium and everything that it kind of carried, the passion that was there, despite there being no friendly organized to inaugurate the stadium. But it was there was so much fanfare, and the excitement was palpable. And then shortly after, we had the first Nehru Cup here in Goa, which had powerhouses of yesteryears like Hungary, Russia, who competed in the early 90s. And so that became very aspirational, and I think from that point, there was absolutely no looking back. So yeah, what started as passion and hobby kind of eventually evolved into something a lot more serious, where to recall an anecdote, and there have been times, and particularly this one time, on the eve of my board exams, I bunked tuitions and ended up at one of the big games at the stadium. And it was funny because I got back home, and so my dad asked me, so he says, "How was the game?" And that caught me by surprise, because I was supposed to be at tuitions. Only later did I realize that I was spotted on television, and so fond memories. But yeah, so it grew into something that translated much more than just being a hobby and a passion. It started to become life at some point, right through my school days. So the Subroto Cup played for the school for a couple of years, but then I had to find that balance, because my parents were not very keen that I kind of left my studies, or rather didn't focus on my studies to focus on football. And so I did take a break, and then got back to it only after the 12th, which was by then too late. As for budding sportsmen and sportswomen, I always say, the ages of 13 to 18 are extremely, extremely critical. And even a year's break there can have a significant effect, negatively, of course, if you're an aspiring athlete or sports person. So unfortunately, back then, like you rightly said, we did not have the opportunities. Certainly, barring cricket, most other sports were not considered viable career options. And so it was a tough choice. But I decided to go down the academic route, and then only post my 12th standard at Aloysius did I actually get back into some sort of football with, the college and university teams. But by then, I had reached the stage in my career where I realized that, the dreams of becoming a professional athlete, had probably, eluded me. And so it was at that point that I decided that, the next best thing would be to kind of work in sport. And so everything I did from that point on was focused solely towards being able to kind of work in sport in the long run.
Yes, Rahul. I also like to let our listeners and viewers know that Rahul's been modest by saying a few cups. He's been winning a lot of cups from the college days. Also, he's been playing for schools, colleges, and clubs as well. There were many clubs. I know Bola Brothers was they were very fond of you. They had you on their strikers list every single time. That was quite a journey, Rahul. I've known you for 2 years because you were my senior by 1. So those 2 years, when you were captain, the leadership that you had given, it was a very nurturing one. You gave everybody an opportunity, and I thought that you were far ahead of your time when you made it a team sport, I would say, rather than just a captain telling what to do. Also, if you could let our listeners know that you were a banker, you were a very successful corporate person as well. It was not just only sports. You did get into a corporate field and then come back to the sports field. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that's the information that I have on you. But you came back because you wanted to give an opportunity. You wanted to give an early opportunity, should I say, to the students, to the sports persons, in order to make it big or not miss the ticket.
So spot on, Carlton. I think, like I mentioned, everything I did from that point on in college was with the eventual aim of working in sport. And so it was a very conscientious decision I took after consulting, of course, a lot of people in the sports industry. I realized that it may have made more sense to have some prior work experience prior to applying for the MBA, which is a specialized MBA, the MBA football industries. So everything I did at that point, and after consulting a few people in the sports industry, I realized that it was preferable to have a couple of years work experience prior to applying for the MBA. Of course, a very competitive, selection process, because we were told that there were about 1,000 odd applicants for the 30 seats, simply because the MBA offered by the University of Liverpool is the only football-centric MBA. Of course, there are tons of MBAs now, and some very good ones that have sports management in general. But this one was football-centric. And so for me, it was, a complete dream. And then in my final year, we had a couple of big corporates that came over to Aloysius, as you're aware, for campus placement, and I was really fortunate to have made the Goldman Sachs interview, and so I decided that would be a perfect stepping stone, and so I did join Goldman in Bangalore. Was there for close to 3 years. But even during my time at Goldman, while of course month ends and year ends, um, were very extremely stressful, and you know how things are, particularly with investment banking. But I think it really offered me the opportunity to do so much there to eventually get to where I wanted to. So to cite an example, upon joining Goldman, I made sure that, you know, I was kind of, despite being a fresher there, but repeatedly having requested, there was a partner, there was a managing director who were on the sports committee, and seeing my passion for sport, I got inducted into the sports committee of Goldman Sachs very early on. That, you know, really helped. Then, every year, Goldman would organize an annual intra-Goldman cricket tournament. So I pushed for a football tournament that did have some pushback initially, but later when they were convinced that it would be a great team outing. Back then, the strength of Goldman would have been in the region of about 1,800 employees, I would think, when we joined. So we said, let's make this intra Goldman tournament a little different. Let's make it very inclusive. And so we ensured that we said registrations, it was mixed teams. There were no only boys or only girls. In fact, there were only girls teams, but only boys teams were not allowed. So it was mixed teams. And so it was teams of 10 with so it was a 5-a-side tournament, but of course with substitutes. And believe you me, Carlton, we received registrations from about 60 teams. So that was 600 people of the 1,800 people competing on that one day. We had another 200-300 show up to support their friends. And it ended up being such a fantastic, just team bonding exercise for everyone. Everyone had fun at the end of the day. And I think that's the part of sport, to unite and have a positive impact. So little things like that really helped me, while applying for the MBA at Liverpool. And then in 2008 is when I eventually applied for the MBA for the following year. And, touch wood, was fortunate, received. My excitement knew no bounds when, the offer letter came through. It was really a dream come true. So 2009 to 2010 was the MBA. And then I spent a couple of years in the UK, worked with the ex-chief executive of the English Football Association, Brian Barwick, who soon after his FA days, founded a company called Barwick Media and Sport. So we were completely involved in the business of sport, and more importantly in football. So that was a very fortunate break to get early on in my career, and that really helped. And then a couple of years down the line, of course, there was an opportunity to move back to India. And I thought, sport was really picking up 2011, 2012. I had coincidentally at that point met senior representatives of IMG at their London offices who were already talking of this, conceptualizing a really, really new big league in India. And so I realized that essentially sport after the IPL was really going to take off. There were all the signs and indications that, sport was going to boom in India. And so I moved back, and again in India, I was really fortunate. Procam International, who are the pioneers of the distance running movement in the country through the erstwhile Standard Chartered Mumbai Marathon, which is now, of course, the Tata Mumbai Marathon. Had some very exciting properties, and it really allowed me to kind of leverage my skills again fairly early on in my career, but to be able to explore so much. So we had two pan-India youth initiatives. One, of course, with Manchester United, that was funded by Airtel. It was a pan-India under-16 tournament. what Manchester and Airtel, I think, as brands were looking at is expanding the sport to every nook and corner of the country. And so that one, with that program, we used a slightly different formula to the one that we used for the Celtic programs. Celtic was basically an under 14 program funded by Mahindra. There was an inter-school tournament, purely inter-school, 14 cities across the country. But with Manchester United and the Airtel Rising Stars, we went with the individual format. So it was pretty intense because the big cities like Calcutta, Bombay, that's when you realize the growing passion and following of the sport of football. It's come a long way over the years. And so in the big cities like Bombay and Delhi and Bangalore, we received registrations to the tune of about 5,000-6,000 kids in each of those cities. And that is only kids in the age group of essentially 13 to 16. So eventually we ended up auditioning about 60,000 kids, and then took the winners to Manchester for a couple of weeks. So that was exciting. In addition to those, Procam also owned the media and marketing rights to all of football in Goa, which included the Goa Professional League, the divisional leagues, age group leagues, the beach football. So one, of course, I wasn't complaining because it allowed me a lot of trips back home to Goa on work. So that was great. But again, the exposure, and I've always wanted to do something first and foremost for football and sport in Goa, and then at the country at large. So that enabled me to kind of again put my skills to good use. And then ever since, post my program days, 2015 onwards, I've been in Goa, of course, but, with several of the clubs here. So initially was fortunate to work with my boyhood club, Salgaonkar, managed their media marketing divisions. Then had a brief stint with one of Goa's older clubs, Vasco Sports Club, a brief stint, of course, because to early 2016 is when FC Goa came calling. And so the last 3 years predominantly were spent with FC Goa in the capacity of vice president, of course. And then I decided, now it was already close to about 14 years that I'd spent in sport, and the yearning and longing to do something much bigger and to do something that will benefit a larger section of society, particularly budding sports persons. And that's when I decided to kind of start SQUAREOUT Sports Solutions. And in brief, what we do in layman's terms, we're essentially looking to connect the dots to ensure we create a more holistic and professional sports industry in the country. I'm happy to cite a couple of examples today, whether it's in Goa or across the country. You realize that we have so much infrastructure in place, but how much of it is actually maintained? The utilization is optimized. So I think we're only trying to connect the dots to ensure we have assets in place. How can these be better utilized? How can we get government and the business houses across the table to kind of help with the overall development of sport, whether it's investment, whether the government can come in and say, here's land available to business houses to kind of further develop sports infrastructure. And so whether it's budding players through our partnerships that we have across Europe, particularly in Spain, Portugal, and England, we're looking to see where they can support. And Carlton, don't get me wrong. I think there's sometimes a lot of criticism that a lot of these foreign clubs are coming into India and looking to commercialize, and that's not our idea. But we just believe, as a lot of foreign coaches have told me, Indian boys, and I say this more from a football perspective, but Indian boys in the age group of 13 to 18 are just as talented, if not more talented, than their European counterparts. Unfortunately, the key development age group between 13 and 18 is where we kind of lose out. And that's where, in those 5 years, you have their players already ready to knock on the senior door of, let's say a championship club. Or if you're really good, in the case of Wayne Rooney, for example, you're on the verge of breaking into the first team of a Premier League club. But our aim is to ensure that our kids get very good exposure at that early age, to be better prepared technically as they move up the ranks. So in fact, even with clubs there, we've been trying to insist that wherever possible, to offer long-term scholarships to, for example, exceptionally talented boys from India. And what's really positive is over the last 1 year, 2 boys at least that I know of are now have basically signed long-term contracts with clubs in Europe. So one is signed, and they're both 18 years old. So one has signed a long-term contract with a 3rd division club in Spain, and another signed a long-term contract with a 3rd division club in Portugal. And that will really benefit us. Even though they may not get as much playing time with the first team, but just being able to train with kids under, probably not that, I don't mean to say again that, our coaches are not good enough, but I think overall, even with the coaches, I think a lot more can be achieved, because we've got some really talented and really good coaches in India, but unfortunately, there's not enough of them to cover our, the length and breadth of this country and the population and the youngsters that are taking up to sport. So I think, just basically with coaching badges, coaching licenses, and being able to improve themselves will go a long way. You also touched upon careers, and today, whether coaching and refereeing are just some of them, but you see the demand that is for data analysts today, where every move of a game is kind of being monitored, and you can draw up data points on 5 minutes of watching a recording, numerous data points. The sports scientists, sports psychologists, sports nutritionists, physiotherapists, and they're all in great demand. I think since the emergence of the advent of the IPL and all the other franchise-based leagues. So whether it's kabaddi, whether it's badminton, of course the ISL, but all of these have clubs that have requirements and are doing so much at the grassroots level and the youth development level, where again, experts are required. So I think, the next 3 to 5 years will see a further boom in sports in the country. And it gives me great satisfaction that there are a lot of sports management institutions that are now, and I know a lot of them are backed by people who've experienced and played the sport at the highest level, so there's this massive opportunity for all the aspiring sports management professionals in the country.
Thank you, Rahul. So just to summarize the second bit of the question you've already answered, SQUAREOUT Sports Solutions is a venture by you that connects dots, because you have the infrastructure, you have the talent, but you are reaching out to governments and corporates in order to join hands with each other in order to take that talent first locally and then throughout the nation. And that's what you are really inspired and interested in doing, which is fantastic. And some of the points, bang on points, like it's not just coaches and referees, it's much more than that. Data analysts, of course, as you said, and also with the things that are picking up, and when it gets monitored, it gets monetized, and when it gets monetized, there's media. So it's sports media, it's into advertisements. There are so many opportunities where people can do anything related to sports these days, especially fitness tracking as well. So there are a lot of things, and including, all of this, there are also people who can probably rent out space in various clubs and stadiums, wherein they can have their businesses, so local businesses can grow even in that that way as well. So there's a job opportunity for everyone who are into sports, and not just into sports, but anything that relates or correlates to sports. So yes, that's absolutely bang on, and I'm really happy that you're starting this project. You started this project, and it's gaining traction. A fantastic little story about your journey, which I'm sure would inspire a lot of parents and future athletes to get in touch with you in order to enhance their stage, in order to enhance their journey towards a professional. And again, like you said, Square Out Sports Solutions, fantastic effort in what you do. Just one more question, Rahul. What would you advise a local budding talent or a probable for representing either Goa or India? What advice would you give them, especially when it comes to Square Out Sports Solutions? So yeah.
Yeah. So, Carlton, I say, firstly, I'll touch upon, advice to budding sports persons. And I always say there is absolutely no substitute for hard work. Like they say, 99% hard work and that 1% luck. Of course, you do need the luck somewhere down the line. But I think if you put in the yards, luck will favor you. I think, like I keep saying, particularly with young footballers who approach me and say, when do you think I'll get the break? So I say sometimes patience is also a virtue. You never know when you're being watched, when you might get that break. But I think it's important, like I said, to put in those yards. So even if it's a ball, like they say, it's the 10,000 hours that you need to put in before you can, become a professional. So I think I say to a lot of parents, and more applicable in times like these where, unfortunately, till I think a vaccine is found, social distancing will be the norm. So, I say you have a ball at home, that's all you need. Spend time with the ball, make it a joy to kind of spend and come to really love that football. And I think over the years you develop that the mastery and the skill that will help everything else. So one is, of course, the technical aspect, the other is the intelligence. In football and most sport is just as much a mental thing as it is technical. But I think that with that intelligence, that invariably is inherited, but it's something that you can still pick up, spending a lot of time. And today kids Carlton, have access to all of the leagues being played across the world, so something we didn't have. And that's how I think so many people I know are Man United loyals, because back then it was few games of the Premier League, but everything you saw was only Manchester United. Of course times have changed, and now you have the Bundesliga and the La Liga, and literally leagues from across the world. But yes, I think it's just important to kind of be patient, work hard, and then kind of luck will follow. Absolutely. Going back to, again, what we do, I think one area that I failed to touch upon, which I think has massive potential and something that we are working on currently, is sports tourism. Again, a multi-billion-dollar industry overseas. But I think other than, essentially, I'd say cricket, here, international cricket events or the IPL, I don't think we've even scratched the surface of what can be achieved in terms of sports tourism in the country. And that's something that, again, we're looking at, looking to explore the possibilities of kind of enhancing, or basically helping build smaller city economies. The contributions are significant when you look at it. I was reading a Bleacher Report recently, and it spoke of events in Chicago and elsewhere where you're talking of in excess of, for the Boston Marathon, where they added in excess of $600 million to the city's coffers by virtue of having having an international event there. So I think we believe that that's a massive potential, and we're looking at obviously sports other than cricket to kind of held within India, to kind of see what can be done to kind of bolster sports tourism. And I keep saying we're fortunate because Goa seems to have all the assets. We have the beaches here, we have the infrastructure. Ironically, when we commissioned a report on the number of grounds in Goa, Carlton, you'll be surprised, but there's about 196 villages in Goa, but there's about 206 football fields in Goa. So, so how those can be better used, like I said, explore the PPP model, the private public partnership model, to see how these assets that have already been created, as opposed to becoming white elephants, the usage can be optimized, and that money then plowed back into sport to help budding talent, because a lot of kids, and I think that will just help the whole ecosystem, because you realize that kids in the remotest parts of India in sport, funnily enough, does seem to throw up a trend of having a majority of the most talented sportsmen and women emerge from really, really rural areas, where they basically barely have access to decent infrastructure like roads and schools. And so it's how best at least basic sporting facilities can be made available to these kids without having to travel those 3 hours for a training session and then travel back after a long day at school. You're never going to be able to find the Olympic champions unless it's accessible and easily accessible to kids from all walks of life and all backgrounds, and again, something that has caught my eye, I think, with they do it a little differently in Europe. Here, I think there is generally a lot more pressure. It's probably something to do with our culture and just the way we are. But I've seen, even at these grassroots tournaments, I think a lot more pressure on kids, to perform from the parents, even on 6-year-old, 8-year-old kids, which I think sometimes can be rather unfair. I think kids have to be allowed to just express themselves and have fun. And in the process of doing so, if one of those kids is basically essentially inclined to one sport or the other, you then further harness his talent to kind of, creating a world champion. But at the outset, I think it's, at a very young age, there shouldn't be as much pressure put on the kids. They should just be allowed to go express themselves, have fun. And in doing so, because sport, I think at the end of the day, like I said, has so many positive benefits. One is, of course, physical well-being. It teaches you to kind of accept failure and defeat. It teaches you discipline. So there are just so many things that sport anyways already is doing for your child. So I think, if he ends up becoming, a world beater, kudos to the child, the parents, and, well done. But if not, it's not the end of the world.
Very true, Rahul. You see, I love the conversation that you just had. You tend to answer my questions that I'm going to ask in future. But bang on, I would.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. It's all right. It saves me talk time. So that's fantastic. What I wanted to tell you is some amazing points. I completely agree that a child should be. There should not be any pressure put upon, especially on a 6-year-old. With that being said, I also wanted to ask you, what do you think we, as citizens or as parents, need to do or act in order to gain something positive, rather than, I wouldn't say have every child become a sports star. wouldn't be possible, because the chances of becoming a sports star is less than 1%, which not many people understand. I'm also going to share something that I go through on a regular basis, Rahul, and I'd also love your comments and thoughts on that, is because I train the kids from a very young age. So when they say start them young, what happens is everybody looks at 13, but 13 is too late for them to begin. 13 is a perfect time for them to begin their career with an established coach or a feeder club, or maybe a club which is, a stepping stone towards a feeder club. Okay, 13, that means a child should know his basic football, should know the rules, should know various other things. So here what happens is there's a lot of opportunity where there are a lot of parents, and I'm happy to tell you right now, there are a lot of Indian parents also putting their kids in at a very young age over here. So 18 months is where we start. Of course, 18 months is too young to start just football. So we do this as a multi sports kind of a thing, where we work on the child's cognition, cognitive skills, the coordination skills, the running and the technique of running. So we observe from a very young age. And you know what? 6 months makes a big difference. 6 months makes a big difference. So if a child is 1.5 and the other one's 2, it is a big difference when they perform or when they try and compete with each other. So imagine if you miss out on your most essential years. That means as a teenager, if you're not going to play for 2 years, okay, you're going to do your 10th standard and then start playing. Like you said, it's a big, very, very negative impact on the child. But what, as parents, that I've seen most of the parents come to me and tell me, okay, now my child needs to learn, and they're already 13. It's heartbreaking for me to tell a parent, see, I can definitely train your child, but becoming a professional, there are many people who've been working since a long time, and 10,000 hours has been way past. If you consider, if they start at the age of 5 and they constantly work, they're constantly working towards a certain kind of thing. And of course, yes, as you age, your training tends to constantly change because of your growth, of various other things, your muscle growth, your bone density, your height, your balance. There are so many things that one needs to consider. So this, as an Indian parent, wouldn't really understand, because they would say, okay, yes, why don't you do that after you graduate or after you finish your school, or do it after 12th standard because you need to get good marks. So what I wanted to tell you is, what I don't see parents understanding is becoming a professional footballer is equal to becoming a professional as a doctor or an engineer. You can't expect your child to do both, because you need the hours, you need the time, and you need the patience. And in order for you to expect your child to do amazingly well at the age of 6, I really don't think that's a good idea, in my opinion. Of course, this is my opinion. I believe, other than the coach and the teachers, experience, and especially this word, I wouldn't say as, see, many people refer to this as failure. I see failure as the best teacher. It's a learning experience. If you fail and learn from your failures at a very young age, there's nothing that can stop you from overcoming it when it comes in future. There's always something. And sports, rightly as you said, is much more than education, because education, you study, you have an exam at the end. Okay. Sports is, you have an exam every single moment, every second is quick thinking, is quick decision making. And this is not just football, it's practically everything. Even table tennis, you have to make quick decisions, and you are responsible for every decision that you make. So I would feel that sports is the best teacher. Sports is the best teacher. However, it's not considered like that. People be like, oh no, sports, why are you wasting your time? We have to spend so much money on that. However, that gives your child instant lessons. You go back, okay, yes, then there are parents who don't want to deal with, oh, my child did not enjoy it, my child took it really bad. But then, okay, yes, you're there for your child right now. Probably tomorrow you're away from your child, he has similar experience. What is he going to do then? He has to cope with it. So the earlier you tend to cope and make your child psychologically strong, then you needn't be a sports star. You can be anyone. And you would know that he'd grow up to be, he or she, would grow up to be a better person, knowing how to deal with failures. So I spoke a lot, but I would want to know your thoughts also. How, as individuals or as parents, how can we make an impact, a positive impact for the people like such as yourselves and the coaches, in order to make our lives much more simpler and focus only on sports rather than parent management, if you get what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Carlton, I think some very interesting points touched upon. My advice generally to parents, I think, is to say, especially at the early ages, let them be, let them enjoy the sport. In fact, what will really help, and what I suggest to a lot of parents, is wherever possible, get involved with your child's sports. So, for example, if he's part of an academy, in fact, we don't have the volunteering system here in India, but it's very common in the West, in UK and the US, where parents volunteer. So let's say your son's part of an academy, he trains thrice a week. I know people are busy, people have their work schedules, but if you do have the time once, in the week, or maybe when they're playing a game, if you can volunteer with the academy, not as a means to kind of use your influence to further your son's progress, but just volunteer, so that your son or daughter can look up to you as also being involved in the activity that he or she loves. So that, I believe, is one certain step. Wherever possible, like I said, each one has their schedules, they're busy, but wherever possible, over a weekend, now of course with the pandemic, everything's being played behind closed doors, but wherever possible, take your child to a game, let him experience it, for real, but in your company, so that he knows that you genuinely care about something that he loves doing. And I think it then at some point fosters and manifests itself in a way of working together as a team. And, I think, again, like you rightly mentioned, between sport and education, I think at some point, 12, 13, of course, parents also tend to panic, because they say, we're putting in the money, but will he make it? But I think by that age, 12, 13, I think kids are grown up enough for parents to be able to have open discussions and conversations with this, and to get an understanding of what the child's perspective is also, ideally as a parent, like you rightly said, as opposed to the closed management, you basically lay it out threadbare for the child to see, to say, here are the pros of what you're doing, here are the cons of if you do try and take this up as a full-time career, here are the pros, here are the cons. It is for you to evaluate. Of course, the experience of the parents will definitely count. But I believe it really helps when, you work as a team, as opposed to, trying to kind of decide the future of the child. So I think from what I've seen, it's worked well. So a very dear friend of mine, his son, in fact, there's a couple of them. One whose son is doing exceptionally well in tennis, and he realized very early on and took his son, opted to take his son out of school and enroll him in open school, and because he had the flair for tennis at a very young age, and he's now on the pro circuit and doing very well. So but not always does it pay off. The other question I get asked a lot is, at what age do we decide whether he will make it or not? That's again a very, very tricky one, because there are, of course, late bloomers like there are in every other field. But what I say is, the bare minimum in terms of your education is a complete must. Even the big academies like the Barsas of the world ensure that anyone who's kind of not done well in academics, especially until they've completed with their graduation, are not allowed to step on the pitch until they've improved their grades. So I think that fine balance is important. And in the very least, I always say to parents, ensure that he's got at least a degree or a diploma or a professional course to fall back on should he not make it as a professional sports person. Because if you don't, like we've discussed, the opportunities are endless, and you will always find a way of getting back. But for that, you need, to have that bare minimum educational qualification, which is a must, I think.
Perfect, Rahul. And I completely agree with you when you say that the parents should be involved. Over here, we have a few parents. Of course, yes, they do have their busy schedule. They don't volunteer per se, but I can give you a few instances. One was every Friday they would come, and this is a very young age group, so ages of 3 to 5. And every parent would know every child's name, and they would cheer. They would cheer no matter who's scoring the goal. And all these children, they're playing against each other, but every move is cheered upon. They constantly talk to them. They say you're doing a good job, which is so positive. And you should see at the end of the session, the kids are so happy. They are thrilled that other people know their name other than their coach. So yes, I'm supposed to know their name, but each and every parent knows. So this really enhances their social skills. And when it comes to social skills, even the parents know each other, and it's like a get together. It's like we're not coming for coaching. We're coming for meeting our friends, having a coffee when they're outside. And of course, over here, infrastructure is good because this is indoors. So in Friday mornings at 9, it's a decent time, because Friday is just like Sunday in most of the countries. So over here, it's a holiday. It's pretty early, but they look forward to coming, having a sip of coffee, watching their children play, and get along really well. So it was fantastic.
Wonderful.
In that point of view, there was another parent who always makes it to his child's coaching session. Never interferes with the coaching. Never interferes, but he encourages his son, of course, but also every other child, be it in his son's team or the other team. Anything good, he always makes a point to give him credit. So he always believes credit should be given where credit is due. And an absolute gentleman. Absolute gentleman. Every time he says, thank you, coach, for your time, which is something that not many people do, but manners, this is what I realized, that manners, this man is so kind that he makes my job much more easy, and wants me to do a better job. There's another group that I want to say, and this is a group of Indian dads. They all have their kids training with a gentleman called Russell, an amazing coach as well, a very good footballer. Even right now, he's much older to me, Rahul, but he plays an amazing game that makes me cry. He runs just like you. He's like a horse. He constantly runs. He's really fast, and he has his coaching academy. And all the parents that put their children in his coaching academy are friends with each other, are friends with the coach. And on Fridays, they used to play a game, and then they also have the team. It's called Superdads. So it's a fun thing to see. I mean, of course, I cannot only focus on the negatives, but there are so much positives as well. And I'm so happy that Indian parents are making the change. They're seeing the potential. Even if it's not sending their children in a professional sport such as football, basketball, hockey, or various other ones. They just want their children to know how life is, how quick decision helps, and in case you hit a setback, always to learn from that and overcome it. So yes, perfect points, Rahul. I really, really enjoyed this thing with you. I'd also, is there something that you want to add? I'm sorry. Is there something that you want to add?
No, I think it's just been so exciting to catch up with you after all these years and discuss sports, something I know you and I absolutely love doing.
Rahul, I'd like to do this more. However, we are a bit short of time, but in case any of our viewers or listeners want to reach out to you, how can they do this?
So they can log on to our website, Carlton, which is squareoutsports.com, which lists out basically everything we're involved with. It also has our details, our contact details. I'd be happy for anyone to reach out, in a personal capacity, whether it's help, advice, guidance with, furthering their careers. Happy to help at all times.
Thank you, Rahul. I really appreciate for all the time taken and for this wonderful interview. I'd really like to do this more often with different topics to discuss in order to give a better insight for the people who are looking forward to this, be it youngsters or the parents of the children who want a better tomorrow in the form of sports. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Carlton. Thanks. It was really good catching up. Thank you for having me on the show. Thanks.